There we go. Hello, and welcome to my first YouTube stream. I hope everyone's having a good Saturday or Sunday wherever you are in the world. So, today is just kind of getting started with just kind of telling you all who I am, and then we're gonna jump right into reading just because I have a good book and I really like it and I'd love to share it. So, if you haven't actually seen my background before, you can tell right now, just off the bat, I'm a VTuber. And so I used to be where to start? So I used to be a noble fairy in the fairy kingdom, and things happened. And my knight, you might have seen him before in some of the art pictures and other scripts that I've done or requested. Kind of went with my knight. We opened a magical bookstore, and that's where we are now. It's been a couple hundred years, and that's that. That's why books are fun, books are exciting. But when you kind of get caught up in reading books a lot, or even playing the computer, you kind of forget how to interact with people. And I know some people can relate to that. Not a good feeling. So, some of the activities that I do, I'm usually over on Twitch. Sometimes I'll play some really random indie games. I usually play like Project Zomboid, or what else have I been playing recently? Usually it's just indie games because there's so many good games out there. Anyways, that's enough of that. I'm going to get started, so let me have a drink of water first, and then I'll get to the book. Okay, so this book right here is called The Space Between Worlds, and it's a fairly recent book that came out by Micaiah Johnson. And so I think we'll get a good feeling for what type of sci-fi this is as we get into the first and second chapters. All right. Chapter 1. When the multiverse was confirmed, the spiritual and scientific communities both counted it as evidence of their validity. The scientists said, "Look, we told you there were parallel universes." And the spiritual said, "See, we've always known there was more than one life." Evil and worthless things can become valuable once they become rare. This is the grand lesson of my life. I'm at the base of a mountain, looking over a landscape I was never meant to see. On this earth, number 197, I died at 3 months old. The file only lists respiratory complications as the cause of death, but the address on the certificate is the same one-room shack where I spent most of my life, so I can picture the sheet metal roof, the concrete floor, and the mattress my mother and I shared on so many different earths. I know I died warm, sleeping, and inhaling honest dirt off my mother's skin. Kara, respond. Kara? Dell's been calling me, but she's only irritated now, and I won't answer until she's concerned. Not because I like being difficult, though there is that, but because her worry over a wasted mission sounds just like worry over me. Behind me, information is downloading from a stationary port into a mobile one. When it's done, I'll take the mobile back to Earth 0, our primary Earth, the one that others think of as real. The information I gather is divided up into light data, population, temperature fluctuations, general news, and dark data, what's affecting their stocks that might affect ours, or, if it's a future world, a full listing of where every stock will close on a given day. The existence of the dark data is a big secret, though I don't know why anyone would care. Insider trading doesn't even sound like a crime. Not a real one. One with blood. Kara. Still just annoyed. I check the download's progress. 60%. Kara, I need you to answer me. There we go. I'm here. There's a pause while she resets to apathy, but I heard the panic. For a second, she cared. You don't always have to leave me waiting. And you don't always have to plant me 2 miles from my download port, but I guess we're both a little petty, huh, Del? I can hear her smiling, but not smiling from 196 worlds away. I've dodged the physical training for my job since just after my hiring 6 years ago. She's so uptight. You'd think she'd just report me, but forcing me on these long walks is her answer. You're wanted back. There's a file on your desk. I already have my pools for the week. Not a pool. A new file. No, but... I put my hand against my chest, expecting to feel a divot, some missing chunk of flesh. I want to tell her it can't be true. I want to tell her I would have known. I tell her I need an hour and cut the link. Apologies, one moment. If I have a new world, it means that particular Earth's me isn't using it anymore. I'm dead again, somewhere else, and I didn't feel a thing. I'm not sure how long I sit, staring out at a horizon that's like mine, but not. The download dings its finish. I could traverse out from here since there's no one to see me, but I steal a little time exploring the place fate tried to keep from me. Another me is gone. As I walk into the valley, I'm a little more valuable walking down the mountain than I was walking up. When I was young, and multiverse was just a theory, I was worthless. The brown girl child of an addict in one of those wards outside the walls of Wiley City that people don't get out of or go to. But then Adam Bosch, our new Einstein and the founder of the institute that pays me, discovered a way to see into other universes. Of course, humanity couldn't just take a look. We had to enter. We had to touch and taste and take. But the universe said no. The first people sent to explore parallel Earth came back already dead or twitching and about to die, with more broken bones than whole ones. Some actually did make it through and survived on the New World just long enough to die from their injuries and have their bodies recalled. It took a lot of smart people's corpses before they learned that if you're still alive in the world you're trying to enter, you get rejected. You're an anomaly the universe won't allow. And she'll send you back broken in half if she has to. But Bosch's device could resonate only with worlds very similar to our own. So most of the scientists, with their safe, self-sheltered upbringings in a city that had eliminated childhood mortality and vaccinated most viral illnesses into extinction, had living doppelgangers on the other worlds. They needed trash people. Poor, black, and brown people. People somehow on the wrong side of the wall, even though they were the ones who built it. People brought for labor, or come for refuge, or were here before the first neoliberal surveyed this land and thought to build a paradise. People who'd already thought this was paradise. They needed my people. They needed me. Of the 380 Earths with which we can resonate, I'm dead in 372. No, 373 now. I'm not a scientist. I'm just what they're stuck with. The higher-ups call us traversers on paper. Using ports put in place by the last generation of traversers, we download the region's information and bring it back for greater minds to study. No better than pigeons, which is what they call us, not on paper. One day, the Eldridge Institute will figure out how to remotely download information across worlds, and I'll be useless again. Back on Earth, 0, I go straight to my floor after changing into my office clothes. Dell stands out tall in the herd of desks, more than 2/3 of them empty now. Her face is all tight because she's been kept waiting by the only person who ever dares inconvenience her. Slumming it, Dell? I thought coming below the 60th floor gave you hives. She smiles, less like she thinks I'm funny and more like she wants to prove she knows how. I'll survive. Of that, I can be sure. Survival is Dell's whole problem. Here on Earth 0, she wanted to be a traverser. She was set up for it too. An Air Force pilot who had had her eyes on space before the possibility of other worlds opened up. But Dell comes from a good family, one with money a long way back. In some worlds, her parents never emigrated from Japan. In some, she joined the private sector instead of this government research institute hybrid. But she survived in over 98% of other worlds, and in most of those, she thrived. I've seen 3 dozen Dells, and all but one wore clothes more expensive than mine. When I take off my jacket, we both hide our wins. Bruises line my arms in jagged stripes, and those are just the parts she can see. It shouldn't be this bad, she says, her eyes moving between quadrants of my body like she's doing hard math. It's only because I've been doubling up. Which is why I advised against it. I need the long weekend. We've had this conversation 5 times this week, and it always ends right here, where her concern is outweighed by the effort it takes to argue with me. She nods, but the look she gives my arms lasts long enough for me to notice. It's when she notices my noticing that she finally looks away. Early on, the professionals on the upper stories, scientists like Bosch and watchers like Dell, told me the bruising was from the resistance of an object, from one world being forced into another, like the violence of north and south magnets being shoved together. Other traversers, and they are a superstitious lot, told me the pressure we felt had a name, and it was Nyame. They said her kiss was the price of the journey. Dell touches the clear screen that's been delivered to me. It looks like a blank sheet of plastic, but once I activate it, I'll know the basics of the world that's just been assigned to me. I learned quickly after moving here that this city loves plastic the way my town loves metal. Everything here is plastic, and it's all the same kind. When a plastic thing stops working, they put it down a chute and turn it into another plastic thing, or the same thing but fixed. Plastic here is like water everywhere else. There's never any more or less of it, just the same amount in an endless cycle. Do you know what your new world is? She asks. You haven't given it to me yet. Can you guess? I should say no, because I resent being asked to do parlor tricks, but instead I answer, because I want to impress her. 175, I say, if I had to guess. I know I'm right by the way she refocuses on me, like I'm interesting, like I'm a bug. Lucky guess, she says, sliding the screen to me. Not really. There's only 7 options. I sit and pull out the drive that contains the payload from my last job. As soon as I plug it in, the dark data will upload to persons unknown and delete itself. I send the light data to the analyst who will interpret and package it for the scientists. Eldridge thinks we traversers don't know the first package of intel. Like the organizations responsible for space exploration in the past, Eldridge is technically an independent company, though it's heavily funded by the government of Wiley City. There is an industrial hatch outside the city walls, in the empty strip of desert between here and Ashtown, which brings in resources from other worlds. Taxpayers, government officials, and especially Eldridge's lesser employees are supposed to believe that is how the company supplements the income it gets from research gains. Sure, bringing in resources from another world so we don't have to harm ours is probably worth a mint. But that doesn't add up to 10th richest man in the city money, which is what our CEO and founder has. Because no traverser has ever made a report to enforcement or asked questions, they think they've pulled this elaborate ruse on lower level employees. But really, we just don't care. A job's a job, and people edging out other people to make money buying and selling something invisible just sounds like rich people problems. I look up at Doe, still standing beside me. She's a rich person, but the kind who's always going to be rich. Rich so far back it'd take 2 generations of fuck-ups for her family to go broke. There's a lot of this up here in the city. Not new money rich people, like Adam Bosch, but whole rich families where the wealth is spread out among the members so it doesn't attract attention. Something else? Saeed is gone, she says. Star? They fired her? When she nods, I ask, did she mess up? I hope she did. Starla Saeed is one of the last traversers remaining from before I started. She was born in what they call a civil war, but really just a ruler systematically killing his subjects. When she was 12, she took a journey across the sea that drowned more people than it delivered. She could travel to over 200 worlds. If she screwed up, it's just a firing. Only interesting because we have the same job and we're close ones. If she was downsized, she's a canary in the wine. 175 was the last world only she had access to. When your death on that world registered, why pay 2 salaries and benefits when they can just put 175 in your rotation? What she doesn't say, but thinks. Why pay a decent salary at all for a glorified career? 175 won't be scheduled for at least a week, but it wouldn't hurt for you to familiarize yourself over your long weekend. And pay attention to the bruising. I want to make sure it's clearing before your next pull. Again, I can interpret her fear over a wasted asset however I want, and I choose to pretend it's affection. The long look she takes at my arms and chest makes me shiver, and for a second I wonder if I'm just pretending. But then she sees my reaction and backs away, nearly turning into Jean. "Miss Ikari," he says, formally, the way she likes. "Mr. Sonogo," she says, also formally, the way he doesn't like. The famous Jean Sonogo has always just been called Jean, or Papa Jean by the papers. "How is our best girl today?" he asks. "Stubborn. She's bruising more than usual. Tell her to pay attention to it." Dell glares over her shoulder. "She might actually listen to you." "I assure you, she ignores us both equally," he says, and Dell walks away. I finished uploading the information packet under my username. So I log out and log back in with my superior's credentials. I use stolen access to send a copy of the light data packet to my cuffs so I can read through it later. Jean has pulled over an empty traverser's chair. Dell is tense. You need to stop teasing her when you're off-world. "But then how will she know I like her?" I say. "You've been flirting with her for 5 years. She knows." He leans forward, setting down a streaming cup, and adjusts his glasses to look at my progress screen. "Am I witnessing company theft in my name? My wounded heart." "Come now, old man. It can't really be theft if I'm just reading. You can't steal something that's still there when you've taken it." "You'll find a large portion of the judicial system here disagrees with you." I wave my hand. Judicial is a wily city word if I've ever heard one, and it has no place between us. Jean knows what I'm doing. Not only was it his idea, but it's his credentials I used to sell myself the info. He thinks if I study the figures and look for patterns the way analysts do, I'll be valuable to the company more than my mortality rate. He thinks I can be more than a traverser, that I can be like him. With the number of desks sitting empty around me, I'm desperate to believe he's right. Jean was in the first group of surviving traversers. Before that, he lived through a rebel army's 10-year border war on the Ivory Coast. As a traverser, he could visit more than 250 Earths. He used to walk the worlds with us, but now he sits in a room and makes the policies surrounding traversing. When he goes out in public, people repeat his famous quote, "I've seen 2 worlds now, and the space between. We are a wonder." From the moment he landed safely on a new world. They shake his hand and take his picture, but he is quick to remind me that he was once worthless too. Jean is the one who told me about Nyame, just like he tells every new traverser. It's the name of a goddess where he comes from, one who sits in the dark holding the planets in her palm. He says the first time he traveled to another world, he could feel her hand guiding him. I've never had much use for religion, but I respect him too much to disagree. "This is 197, yes?" he asks, nodding to the screen showing the info I've just pulled. The sky scientists were braying over it. "They're called astronomers, Jean, and yeah, they put a rush on it. They want pictures of some asteroid that's too far away, and they didn't want to wait a week for." I try to rotate my arm and wince at the ache. They paid a premium to rush a few pictures? Jean makes a dismissive clucking sound. Too much money. Not enough purpose. Jean's dislike of astronomers is an occupational hazard, and the dislike is mutual. Those working strictly in the field of space exploration haven't been fond of the inter-universal travel, the new frontier that came along and snatched up a chunk of their funding. In return, those who work at Eldridge treat space exploration the way a young male lion looks at an older, sickly male lion. No outright violence, but maybe showing too much excitement in the anticipation of the death. Jean nudges the mug I'm ignoring me. Jean nudges the mug I'm ignoring towards me again. Sighing, I take a sip and barely keep from spitting. I was really hoping for coffee, I say, forcing myself to down the dark mixture of vitamin D, zinc, and too many other not quite dissolved nutrients. Coffee is not what you need, he says in the accent my limited world experience first thought of as French. Nyame kissed you hard this time. With teeth. So I see. Dell marked you for observation. Of course she did. I've only been scheduling pools close together so I can take a few days off. I told her that. A vacation? I should think staying in place would have more appeal for you. Not a vacation. It's a family thing. At the mention of family, he smiles, which just goes to show what he knows. In the worlds where he survived, where he wasn't a child soldier, where he didn't die trying to stow away into Europe, he did so because of the strength of his father and the bravery of his mother. From the worlds I've studied, his deaths are usually despite their best efforts. Most of my deaths can be linked directly to my mother. Enjoy this time off. Don't do too much studying. I'll try. But not very hard. I've been staying up too late studying world stats and the company's internal textbooks since he first mentioned the possibility of a promotion to analyst. My mother used to say I was born reaching, which is true. She also used to say it would get me killed, which it hasn't. Not yet, anyway. Not here. Before I head home, I swing by Starla Saeed's place. I'm nearly too late, and I approach her apartment among a stream of people in uniforms moving out boxes of her stuff. She's standing in the yard, flanked on either side by immigration enforcement. Her eyes are glassy but clear. She might have been crying earlier, but she's done with it now. She looks strong, defiant, head held high, like she hasn't lost everything in the world. I hope I look like that when they come for me. Star. When she turns to me, she looks neither surprised nor particularly pleased. But when she looks down at the basket of apples in my hand, she gives a little smirk. We're not all Ashtowners. Caramenta, she says. Some of us have tree fruit in our homelands. I look down. Most traversers come from the encampments outside of walled cities. I just assumed the other towns were like my wasteland. Starla comes from outside of Ida City in the Middle East, one of the biggest and oldest walled structures nestled in the space between what used to be Iraq and Iran. Maybe the settlements out here are full of fruit and white bread and everything else Ashtown doesn't have. A man carrying a box walks too fast, and the sound of glass clinking against glass rings out between us. She watches him like he's dragging her baby by the foot. She looks like she might yell. She's known around the office for her quick temper, but her eyes flick to the enforcement agent standing closest to her, and she swallows it down. She's furious, but helpless. I just thought you'd like something. I know it's a long flight. I hold out the basket. You can still resent me even if you take them. She smiles again, her mouth wide and full. I intend to. She takes the basket, but it's more out of pity than wanting the fruit. I'll miss you, I say. So look for me, she says. I'm only missing on a few hundred worlds, and this is just one more. I recommend Earth 83 me. She's my favorite. A woman in a jumpsuit tells the agents they're done, and the men push Star along. She looks at me over her shoulder. Don't waste your time feeling guilty, she says. It will be you soon enough. Over my dead body. But that's not what she needs to hear. She needs my absence more than anything. A witness to the shame makes it worse, even if it's a friend. So I nod goodbye and turn away. There are infinite worlds. Worlds upon worlds into absurdity. Which means there are probably worlds where I am a plant or a dolphin, or where I never drew breath at all. But we can't see those. Eldridge's machine can read and mimic only frequencies similar to ours, each atom on the planet contributing to the symphony. They say that's why objects like minerals and oil can be brought in easily, but people have to be gone from the world first. Their structure is so influenced by their world's unique frequency that there's no possibility of a DOP. Before we lost 382, there were rumblings of a war. I'm not sure how many nuclear bombs it would take to change the song of the place until we can't hear it anymore, but we lost 382 over the course of an hour. A drastic shift making the signal weak, then another, then nothing. It should scare us more than it does, but they were already in alien territory anyway. That's why the number was the highest. Each number indicates a degree of difference, a slight frequency shift from our own. Earths 1 through 10 are so similar that they are hardly worth visiting. When I pull from there, no more than twice a year, it's just to make sure the intel is still exactly like ours. 3 of the worlds in which I still live are in the first 10 Earths. There's something gratifying about going places where I'm dead and touching things I was never even meant to see. In my apartment, I keep a collection of things from those places sealed in bags on the wall. I've never cataloged them, but I can identify each item on site. Dirt from the lot where my childhood home would have been in a world where the slums never made it that far. Smooth rocks from a river that's been dead on my world for centuries. A jade earring given to me by a girl on another Earth who wanted me to remember her, but who only let me love her at all because she didn't know where I came from. There are hundreds, and when I get back from Earth 175, there will be one more. The worlds we can reach are similar to ours in atmosphere, flora, and fauna, so most of their viruses already exist there. But just in case, I seal my souvenirs in the bags Eldridge used for specimen collection before they got bored playing biologist and shifted hard to mining and data collection. I'm staring at my clothes, trying to figure out which to bring. It's hard living in Wiley while visiting Ashtown. Not a lot of people go between. Sure, Wileyites will visit Ashtown like tourists, and Ashtown kids sometimes get scholarships to Wiley schools, but no one ever tries to fit in both places. Wiley City is like the sun, and Ashtown is like a black hole. It's impossible to hover in between without being torn apart. I've spent my time in the city accumulating the kind of clothes that will make me look like I've never been to Ashtown at all. If I were smart, I'd keep a set of Ashtown clothes for these trips instead of standing out like a mirror in the desert every time I go. But deep down, I don't want to fit in. I don't want to look like I belong there, because one day I want to pretend I never did. I'm fingering a blouse I can't bring. True black synthetic silk. Nothing a former ruralite holy girl would wear when my sister calls. Instead of a greeting, she answers with a grunt of frustration. Preparation's going that well, huh? I say, sitting on the bed. Esther is still just a teenager, but the amount of responsibility she's inherited makes her seem older. It's fine, she says, voice primely forced. Ruralites aren't allowed to be angry, not at other people, because it would violate their code of endless compassion and understanding. Michael still being useless? No one tests Esther's faith or her temper like her twin brother. Kara, you know all people have value and use in the eyes of God. Michael would be a valuable contribution to the dedication if he'd shown up at any of the preparations. Ah, there it is. Esther's rage. The venom no less potent for all its masking. And now we have cousin Jariah saying he might drop in, and I roll off the bed. Jariah? Yes, you remember. Tall, red hair. He moved out here for a little while when we were young, but then left for the Deep Waste as a missionary. Of course I don't remember. I can't. He's based in some small town on the other side of the Deadlands now, but Dad thinks he might make the pilgrimage. She goes on, but I'm not really listening. I reach under my bed, pulling out my box of journals. Esther said when we were young, so I pick a journal from not long after Esther's father married my mother. Caramenta, age 13, is written on the cover. Esther would have been 5. Hey, I gotta go, but I'll see you soon. I hit the button on my cuff to disconnect from Esther, then begin searching through the journal. Eventually, I found an entry mentioning Jariah moving in, and skim a bit longer until he moves away again, gleaning all I can about him. Apparently he was very funny, though not great at personal hygiene. I find a few more references in later journals, but then it really is time to go. My mother won't yell if I'm late, not like she used to. But she'll cloak herself in this sad, martyred quiet that I can't stand. I put the journals back. In them, cousin Jariah is just called Jory. I whisper both versions of the name so that when I say them out loud later, it won't sound like it's the first time. I've gotten rid of a lot of things from my past, but I'll always keep the journals. I read them like data from another world. doing research on people who love me. I don't write now. I make lists in my current journal, but that only started as a way for me to practice writing in Eldridge's code, so I'm not sure it counts. In the box under my bed, there's one journal for every year, 2 for some years, but I've had the same one for 6 years and haven't managed to fill it up. Maybe it's because there's so little that I'm sure of these days. I've been in Wiley City for 6 years as a resident. In 4 more, I'll be pronounced citizen. For now, I'm nowhere. I live in Wiley, but I'm legally still Ashtown's, and neither has a claim on me that counts. It's a space between worlds, no different from the starline darkness I stand in when I traverse. The darkness is worth it because I know what waits on the other side. Reasons I have died. The Emperor of the Wasteland wanted to make an example of my mother, and she started with me. One of my mother's boyfriends wanted to cover up what he did to me. I was born addicted and my lungs didn't develop. I was born addicted and my brain didn't develop. I was left alone and a stranger came along. The runners came for a neighbor and I was in the way. The runners came for my mother and I was in the way. The runners came for my mother's boyfriend and I was in the way. The runners came for no one, serving nothing at all but chaos and fear, and I was what they found. Sometimes I was just forgotten in the shed where she kept me while she worked or spun out, and in the length of her high and the heat of the sun, I fell asleep alone and hungry and forever. Reasons I have lived. I don't know, but there are 8. Let me adjust my seat, get a little more comfy. I've been driving. Oh, wait, hold on. So, this is chapter 2. I've been driving in the desert for an hour when the truck pulls up too close behind me. I've prepared to be stopped, but deep down I'm still surprised. Getting shaken down by Border Patrol is only for outsiders, and the man walking up to my car with a greedy silver smile is proof I've made it. His teeth tell me he's one of Nick's lieutenants, the kind of guy I would have been happy to land when I was from here. Like all runners, he smells like dirt and sun. He's tattooed solid up to his jawline, where the ink stops abruptly. The display of vanity strikes me. These days, I look for status by reading clothes, haircuts, and high-dollar wrist cuffs. But this too pretty runner reminds me that I grew up wanting to lick silver teeth. Lovely weather for a day trip, he says, like it isn't the same 90 degrees with the hot wind kicker it always is out here. Not taking a day trip. I don't know when my posture changed, when my voice dropped, but when I look at him square, I want him to recognize me as one of his own, almost as much as I don't. I wish I knew him, knew the name of his mother called him, so I could throw it in his face. Nick's runners all go by Mr. Bones, Mr. Shine, but I bet he's an Angelo. Toll for looky-loos from the Wiles is 300. You mean 250. Times are tough. I was just here. 300. I reach into my dashboard and take out the 300, just like last time, though I'm going to try haggling every visit until it works. He takes the cash with a nobleman's slight bow. Enjoy your stay in Big Ash. When he starts to walk away, I clear my throat. My receipt. Mr. Cheeks, he says. Tell the next one you're paid up. My mother lives in a farmhouse in the rurals where a real farm never was. The rurals are a part of Ashtown that thinks itself a subdivision, even though the only thing separating it from the concrete stack pods that make up the rest of the city is a wooden fence and the agreement of people on both sides of that fence. The people in the rurals are all about charity and piety and religion. The people in downtown Ash are all about anything else. There aren't many cars out here. Even runners usually keep their vehicles on the other side of the fence. And sometimes when I drive out, kids run beside me for as long as they can, reaching out to touch the paint. Not today, though. Today they're all indoors, sequestered in thankful prayer as they prepare for the dedication ceremony. My mother's house is in deep, where the gray-white sand begins to turn a natural tan at the edges. The front of the house has been whitewashed for the day, the plaster cast of Mary wiped clean. It's Jesus' mother, Mary, not the foot-washing ex-prostitute Mary, which has always struck me as something of a missed opportunity given my mother's background. Mary's head is inclined toward a flute-playing Krishna. Who smiles benevolently in the empty way everyone in the rurals smile at strangers, and at me. My stepfather generally preaches more from Islam than Hindu, but there really isn't a statue for that. So this book, it's kind of starting off a little slow, I think, but it's technically a sci-fi. So there's also a lot of commentary in this book. So it's called The Space Between Worlds. So we're getting kind of set up here with the differences between the high society of Wiley City and the ruralness of Ashtown, where our main character is going right now. My mother lets me in. Her mouth a line as even and unbending as her principles. Her black hair, 4C hair that I know is twice as wild as my own, is pulled back in a bun so tight it looks straight. I'm just going to say a note here as well. So black hair has there are different types of black hair. Some are more curly than others. I don't know the exact details, but literally you could probably Google 4C black hair and it'll give you an idea of the type of hair that her mom's has. Her patterned dress is clean, but washed thin. It bears no scars from mending, so it must be one of her best. I could buy her new dresses. I could keep her in the kind of flash she used to demand from her men before she walked away from the life with the preacher from the dirt. But she won't take anything from me these days, not even a hug. Her eyes are down. Her eyes are always down, this mostly silent woman who will wear no skirt higher than her knee, and no lip stain darker than a blush. My mother was a woman who had hair feathered whatever color suited her mood, and knew how to look men in the eye until they gave her what she wanted. You're early, she says. That's nice. I took today off, I say, but she's already turning to lead me inside. I've seen her 100 ways. With a shaved head, with hair to her back, with rows of piercings for eyebrows, blind in one eye, pockmarked with no teeth, and even as a still beautiful matron of the house, who could charge as much as the young because she never used and always took care of herself. But this version is my least favorite. She spends her time passing out pamphlets downtown, shaming the workers at the house who took care of me when she didn't, who saved my life enough times to get this version of me to adulthood. My family's walls are covered with more of the same holiness that's found outside. At least when we were poor, she was original, painting murals on the concrete with the same paste she used to dye her hair. Now her walls are grids, family pictures, the old school static holograms that flicker on and off with age, broken up with religious icons. The more interesting things on the wall, dried animal bones and drawings of creatures with skulls for faces, are from Esther's fates. My stepfather might love the Bible and the Quran, but my sister gives almost as many sermons as he does these days, and she favors less organized religions, some that don't even have a unifying text. Jeriah wasn't able to make the journey, my mother says, and I exhale a bit from the dread that I've been hiding. I won't have to pretend all day then. At least, no more than usual. She turns away from me. Company's here, she says. She won't say Caramenta. She's ashamed now to have given her daughter a slum name. My stepfather's name is Daniel. His children are Esther and Michael. My mother was born Mallory, but those who trick and Ash use X's in their names as an identifier. So she'd been Lorix since before I was born. Here and now, she's just Mel. My stepfather comes in, his smile wide and genuine. He is blonde like his daughter. It's an advertisement. Real Wileyeites have white hair and skin, so pale it's a shade of off blue. Daniel's hair reminds his congregation that his great-grandfather came here willingly as a missionary from the city, not as a migrant or a refugee trying to get into it. He hugs me easily, with less hesitation than it took my mother to look me in the eyes. You made it, he said. What do you think of the tie? Two on the nose? Usually he wears a tunic, like all men from the rules, but outsiders are coming and he's attempting to dress like them. His tie is covered in little fish, smiling at one another as they swim in all directions. Are you going for holy and approachable, or completely cheesy? He fakes thinking about it. Both? Then it's perfect. Thought so, he says, then nods over his shoulder. Twins are out back. I see Esther and Michael outside, having the kind of conversation I'm sure only twins have. Esther looks pleading, Michael resolved. Neither seems to be speaking, and yet both have been understood. Michael's black hair would have made him the outsider in the family if Mom and I hadn't shown up. He's nice to me, but not like we're family, not like I'm someone he will ever give a nickname or call late at night. The twins don't remember their mother, a woman whose face and past match theirs far better than my mother's ever will. But I've looked her up. In worlds where their mother lives, my mother never meets Dan and never leaves downtown. Their conversation picks up again, and the wind carries Esther's raised voice against the window. I turn away, trying to remember the last time I cared about anything enough to scream for it. I change in my old room, now converted into Esther's office. When she comes in, I take a container from my bag and toss it over my shoulder at her. She smiles as she catches it, running her thumb along the face cream silver top. "You shouldn't feed my vanity. It's my worst trait," she says, sitting on the cot that will be my bed tonight. That you think vanity is your worst trait is a sign of your vanity. I put on tights, even though they're thick, black, and hell to wear in the desert, and Esther's eyes fixate on my legs. This last trip has pushed the traversing bruises, unique stripes on either side of my limbs and torso, down my thighs and onto both sides of my calves. That alone wouldn't force me to put on tights, but the garage tattoos on the back of my thighs, a massive eye on each leg, are also exposed. My mother can never see the tattoos. I've had tattoos removed from my arms, chest, the base of my neck, and behind my ears. I've saved a little at a time to have the rest removed, but I started on the ones in plain view first. The next one I erase will be the largest. The 6 letters of someone else's name scrawled across my back from shoulder blade to shoulder blade. "Mom still thinks you never got tattoos before you left Ashtown," she says. I concentrate on not pausing in my task. How did that come up? "Michael wants a plated tooth. She's been using you as an example because you're worldly, but you didn't alter your body. He wants a renner's tooth." "Worse," she says. "He only wants onyx, like Nick. No." I look up from my tights so she'll know I'm serious. "You can't let him. If runners see him with an emperor's tooth, they'll rip it out. It's an insult. If he has to get one, get silver. Silver's safe." She's looking at me wide-eyed, seeing too much. It's the same way she looked at me when she was 12. She's probably wondering how a rural-like girl knows so much about downtown Ash's runners. "Is that what you two were fighting about?" She waits a second, deciding whether she's going to let me get away with moving the conversation along, then answers, "We weren't fighting. We were discussing, and no, that was about something else." My sister tells me everything, so her pause means that this is Michael's secret. I was good at hiding things from her before I left home. I say, sitting next to her, "That's why Mom never knew. And for me, I never saw them either until you came back. You were 12. I could have hidden an eye patch from you then." We talk for a little while, though I mostly listen. Eventually, she looks out the window and stands. I stand too, but I don't have anywhere to go. This is where we separate. The sun is setting, so she will need to pray. Today, the theme will be gratitude, a litany of thanks from a girl raised in a place with nothing. She will don an apron for tonight's festivities, something her people wear when they interact with the non-religious, a sign of their willingness to help if asked. And I will wear my dress, a sign that I am not a part of the church, just a non-believing donor. But she's taking the face cream with her, just like she does the lip balm and the tooth rinses I bring. She wears products from me that change her appearance. And it almost makes up for the fact that she is too fair to ever look like me. When I see her, absent the sunspots of her peers, her teeth shining white in that ever-benevolent smile, I think, there I am. Because that's what a sister is. A piece of yourself you can finally love because it's in someone else. shoes. I had forgotten to bring cheap shoes. I had grabbed the only dressy pair I owned, black with a distinctive gold line running up the back indicating the brand without saying it. Dell got them for me because she knew I'd embarrass myself at company parties in whatever I owned, and by extension embarrass her. But it doesn't matter that they were a gift. These shoes could buy a month of food for the families out here. When I walk into the new church, they click loudly in a crowd of heels too worn down to match the sound. It shames me more than it shames them, but it does shame us both. I make up for it by smiling too much, because my usual aloofness will look like elitism to them. At the dedication ceremony, senior members of the church speak about how much this new building will mean to the community. I believe it. In my journal, there's a picture of the old church. At best, it was a glorified barn. This new building has real walls, the kind that actually keep the heat out instead of just blocking sunlight. And my stepfather's greatest pride, it has a series of attached rooms, each large enough to give temporary shelter to a family of 4. Rural wastelanders eschew formal houses, but on bright days when the sun is too close and the atmosphere too thin, even those adept at living rough need more than mud over their heads. The theme of the night is gratitude, so every speaker thanks God. But the theme for the night is also survival, so they are careful to thank Nick almost as often. I don't know if they're thanking the emperor for a donation, or if they're thanking him for the privilege of having a building without his runners burning it down, but they aren't really grateful, just afraid of what will happen if they don't look it. Nick is sitting behind me. The ruralites always save a seat in the back row for him during services, even though he rarely attends. Just as they always save a seat for the house and proprietor, even though Exley has no use for religion. They are both here tonight, though. Exley because standing there looking like the only soft thing in the desert is an excellent advertisement, and Nick because he wants to remind people who bow to God that they must bow to him first. I stare at Exley, done up in leather and black glitter, and long for the days when the proprietor knew my name. After the speeches, my mother serves refreshments from behind a counter, while the rest of my family gives tours of the facility. When I go to her, she hands me a glass of lemonade like I'm just another donor. It's her own recipe. Hints of honey, the scent of lavender without the taste. She's not allowed to brag, but when I say it's the best thing she's ever made, she doesn't correct me. Did you have to invite everyone? I ask. She manages to convey irritation without compromising the benevolence in her face. It's all in the eyes. He gave. Everyone who gave is entitled to come. She has to be respectful, because if you disrespect Nick, he may want to teach you a lesson. That lesson can be a quadrupled utility bill, or a house fire set by a smiling runner. I've never catered to him, but then I've never been afraid to die, which has probably been my problem on more than one earth. I don't know why you hate him so much, she says. It's not as if he's ever crossed us personally. I open my mouth to tell her how wrong she is, but she continues, saving me from making a mistake. We left downtown before he even inherited. Hearing my mother talk about leaving the center of Ash reminds me where and who I am and which one she is. She doesn't know how many other hers died in the concrete because of Nick and even worse father. But you'd think she could guess. You're right. I've never met the Emperor. I guess I just don't like the idea of him. She stiffens, tapping the lemonade ladle against the bowl. The sound is too loud in the room, which has suddenly gone silent. Which means he's here. If I turn around, I'll see the spectacle of Nick. 2 tight rows braided just above his left ear, because he is the third in his line to control Ash. The rest of his hair left down. So everyone, come on. So everyone who sees him knows he's not a man who works in the wastelands or with machines, or at all. And in his mouth, all 4 incisors plated in synthetic onyx so they shine like black diamonds, and yes, the rumors are true. Cut just like them too. And there is a world where in this moment, a more reckless and honest me smashes my lemonade glass and cuts his throat with the shard, where I put my hands into his still warm blood, and the thick of it washes away the multitude of shames I carry. But that world and this me are so different that I doubt Eldridge would ever be able to resonate with it. I am no longer reckless, and I have never been honest. I set the glass back down at my mother's station and leave the room to find Esther. I haven't heard Nick's voice in over 6 years, and I intend to keep it that way. To bring the night to a close, everyone is gathered outside. Daniel and Esther each had moments addressing the crowd tonight, but this time it's Michael who steps forward alone. He doesn't speak. He just kneels, checking the wind every so often, until we finally see a faint spark in his hands. By the time he walks back to the crowd, the sky is exploding over us. Michael is the son of the Ruralite leader, but he doesn't give sermons. He worships with fire. The religious are the only ones who use explosive powders anymore. Weapons capable of murdering from a distance were banned after the Civil Wars, when Nick Sr. took power, long before I was born. It feels miraculous to watch the fireworks, louder and brighter than anything Wiley City can ever give me. Voices murmur through the crowd. This is when Ruralites believe in making confession, when the fire has grabbed God's attention and no mortal ears can hear through the explosion. So I wait, and when the next bloom of gold breaks open into the sky with the scream, I tell my truth. I am not Caramenta, I say. Caramenta is dead. Caramenta died 6 years ago on Earth 22, my actual home Earth. I was born Carolee, but I'd been Caralex since my 17th birthday, when I'd finally gotten tired of fighting for scraps in a world that would always be Nick's. Once his dad died and Nick got true power, I put an X on my name and became his favorite girl. But he had a jealous streak as wide as a smile. I learned early on he was no different from my mom in handing out punishments for things I'd never done. My real mother, not the wilting silk scrap of a woman on Earth 0 who belongs to Esther, Michael, and Daniel, but who will never be mine. Out on the edge of the wasteland that was still half wet from the mostly dead river, Nick spent the night pretending to drown me. He held my head in this muck, but pulled me back before my lungs were even really burning. I'd say, "Why'd you stop?" And he'd say, "Practicing." Then he'd left me alive, like he always did, because he liked me walking back to him, tired and blistered. He liked caring for me afterward, as if the damage were done by someone else. I was in a piece of the wasteland where the rules still reach in Earth Zero. Face caked in mud that turned as hard as fired clay under the sun, wishing I had anywhere else to go. That's when I saw the body. Her eyes had starbursts of red in the white. Her left arm was broken out once, and then back again in like a puppet. Her shoulders caved forward, but her spine bent back. In all my years of living rough, I've never met anyone who could stomach doing that to a person. Hers were the only tracks in the dirt. Drag marks, not footprints. She'd pulled herself a little with her good arm, but whatever grace had pushed her had worn off, and a blood tide was crawling from her mouth across the sand. I crouched down when I should have run away. Maybe I meant to steal what I could. Maybe I needed to see what mark that kind of death left on a human face. That's when I saw it. The part of the face that wasn't destroyed was mine. The corpse was me, a neater, untattooed version of me. I stared at her, my face, and thought it was a joke. Next I heard the voice, small but not distant. It was saying a name. I took out the transmitter, grazing an unpierced version of my own ear, and put it in. "Menta? Garamenta? Are you there?" It wasn't that the voice was lovely, but the concern in it was pure and sweet, something I'd never heard before and haven't gotten tired of yet. "Yes, I'm here," I said. I put on the woman's cuff and activated it, recognizing me as her. The picture on Caramenta's digital ID looked even more like me than her corpse. Her address was in Wiley City. I've always wanted to live in Wiley City. Caramenta, Caramenta, Caramenta. I repeated it so I wouldn't forget. "Good. Thought we'd lost you on your first day out." "No, I'm just confused." An irritated sigh, followed by, "I'm bringing you back. You're not ready. I'll walk you through the return procedure, but just this once. When you get back, you'll need to do more than pretend to study the manuals." Maybe it shouldn't have been easy, peeling the clothes off my own corpse and leaving just enough of my things to identify her as me. But anything is possible once you convince yourself it's necessary. I'm not sorry, and I've never been ashamed. After I changed into her clothes, Dell pulled me over and I was born into a brand new world. That was 6 years ago. 6 years since I've heard anyone say my real name. Some days, I can't even remember it. On Saturday, I work in the garden with Esther, because it offends me less than accompanying my brother, than accompanying my mother and stepfather while they preach. The ground in Ashtown grows like it's half salt, leftover corruption from the same factories that used to pump soot into the air, giving the town its name. So the garden is an abandoned airplane hangar on the edge of my parents' land. There are rows of pots filled with imported soil, and the installation is better than most houses in this area. The congregation helps with the tending, and my stepfather divides the harvest evenly among his parishioners. Ruralites aren't allowed to gossip, but they are allowed to stare, and those working with us can't help but look at the once holy daughter of their leader, who went into the city and turned sinner overnight. I stay close to Esther, hiding in the shadow of her belonging. The work clothes I'm wearing stay in the back of my closet until visits like this. So even though it's been years since I bought them, they still have that too new look. Like I'm an imposter. And I am. Back in the wilds, I pass for someone who has known stability and money her entire life. Here, I pass for someone who remembers how to pray and scrape, who would never let the same kind of peppers they've spent weeks nurturing mold forgotten in the back of her fridge. I'm always pretending, always wearing costumes, but never just clothes. Esther and I water and check the plants for salt rot, a parasite carried in on the bodies of flies. It's the only thing that lives in the sludge far to the south that used to be a lake. The environment got too toxic for anything else, but salt rot survived, jumping from reeds to ground plants to trees, leaving petrified white behind as it leached the nutrients out of its hosts. On Earth 312, the factories we chased out here are all still pumping, and there are no human inhabitants beyond workers who don't leave the airtight facility. In that world, salt rot continued to evolve after the trees and the flies were dead. In that world, it can infect the skin of a human and spread slowly but inevitably until a few years pass and all that's left is a glistening white corpse. They used to call it salt rot too, but now they call it Lot's wife and treat it like it's a curse instead of just a virus. I have the tiniest leaf of it in one of my sealed bags in the collection on my wall, and even though Eldridge's specimen bags are guaranteed to contain it, having Lot's wife in my home is the closest I get to feeling true danger anymore. Let's see, we have just a couple more pages of chapter 2, and then I will end it at that point. So maybe just another 15 minutes or so. 10 minutes. I think about that danger as I watch my gloveless stepsister frown at a white leaf before tearing it off and tossing it into the incinerator. On 312, this whole building would be burned, and Esther would be exiled into the wastelands for daring contact with it. We're supposed to stop to eat and then finish up, but there are 2 kids watering the other side, and Esther walks our lunch over to them. Where Esther's clothes are faded thin but still clean and intact, these children's are crusted and ripped. They've got more in common with me than her, but they've been avoiding my gaze all day. We'll just push through and finish up, she says when she comes back from speaking with them. It's an easy day anyway, and we'll have an early dinner. She doesn't make excuses, just like when she didn't ask before giving my lunch away. When Dan steps down, it will be Esther, not Michael, to replace him, and at times like this, it's obvious why. We get home late for dinner, but Michael comes home even later. He plops down loud with his eyes raised. I wonder how long it took him to make that noise again, to learn how to lift his eyes. In Caramenta's journal, he's a pious boy, as reluctant to be noticed as the rest of his people. His fingertips are clay red, like all the edgiest ruralite teens. They dig their fingers into blood-colored rivets in the ground and leave them for as long as they can. The brownish stain on the nails is the closest thing to the black nail polish of downtowners they can get away with. I'm admiring the ingenuity of his rebellion when he turns it on me. Is it true that you kill people? Michael! He flinches but doesn't look at my mother. Jeremiah says traversers actually go to other places to kill people. They laser blast their heads right off. You know, we don't discuss that business in this house, Daniel says. That business is my job. Or my company. I'm not exactly sure which, but I know it's living, breathing blasphemy to them. People who don't believe in taking up more space, air, or attention than strictly necessary are unsurprisingly opposed to claiming whole new worlds. They see it as new colonialism, and they're not wrong. I turn to Michael. That's a ridiculous urban legend. Laser blasters don't exist, and even one of Wiley City's stunners would probably get fried if I tried to bring it over. I flex my fingers at him. I have to use my bare hands. My mother rolls her eyes, which is close enough to her raising her head that I feel accomplished. Esther clears her throat to hide her laugh, and that feels like a victory too. Michael looks down, considering what I've said. But do you kill people here? They say that's why we've never seen traversers from other planets. You kill them all. The company line is we probably have been visited by transversers, and we just don't know it. Our traversers have never been caught by another world surveillance, and other traveling worlds would take all the same precautions. But I don't tell my edgy stepbrother this. I just take a sip from my lemonade, maintaining eye contact long enough to make him shift in his seat. I heard this theory that every time a traverser is found on Earth, there's an employee waiting to garrote them and dump their body in a hole. My first week at Eldridge. Other traversers, and there were a lot back then, told the stories whenever we had a second without a watcher present. I was still new, newer even than they thought I was, so I didn't offer an opinion. It wasn't until later, when half of those eager gossips had dropped off, and Starla and I were bonded beneath the idea that we'd be the last two standing, that I brought it up. I asked her if she thought the company killed traversers from other worlds. She just tilted her head at me. Eldridge says that they've never caught traversers from other worlds, remember? She was always smart, savvier than me, so her procedural answer was a hint to drop it. It was a company function after all, but we were alone outside while she smoked something from a green glass pipe that filled my lungs and mouth with the taste of figs each time she exhaled. It made me bold. Sure, they say that, but what if? She rolled her eyes larger and darker than any I'd seen outside of Ashland. What if, so what? A handful of people are killed for trespassing when they're found, and you still have an apartment. I'm still neck deep in imported smoke, and maybe they kill people, maybe they don't. Do you care? That was when I realized I didn't. I was curious, that was all, but not morally affronted. There might have been people dying, but they seemed inconsequential, against the mention of my city apartment and the promise of citizenship that seemed so close, even back then. Starla wasn't just telling me these hypothetical murdered traversers didn't matter. She was telling me nothing mattered. When I went, she wouldn't riot, wouldn't turn down my pulls to keep me in a job. I wonder if she would have kept inviting me out onto balconies for free smoke if she knew how things would actually shake out. That herself would keep surviving, and mine would die off more and more each year. After dinner, when my family goes to sleep, I'll pack my things and slip out. Tomorrow is Sunday. They will spend the morning in silent prayer, preparing for services I don't even know how to attend. And they will think I'm rusty because I've been gone so long, but soon they'll see I haven't forgotten. I just never knew. Outside of the city, the land is cut with a muddy scar that's still a low river in some worlds. This is the place where the dirt on my wall comes from. The place where, under another sun, I watched Caramenta die. I should stop, get out, and acknowledge the loss that no one else ever will. I should, at some point in the last 6 years, have brought a candle. But I won't. There's a saying in Ash, mostly downtown, that's been applied to everything from thrones to land to spouses. It doesn't matter how you got it. If you have it, it's yours. So I don't mourn the dead girl whose life I live. Just like I don't spare another thought for Starla, whose absence means a bump in my paycheck and nothing else. I just begin the long drive back to the apartment, the city, and everything else I stole. Because it doesn't matter who it used to belong to. It's mine now. And that's the end of chapter 2. So that's the question about the traversers. That's the whole question, because we've only seen so far that there are multitudes of different people, but not all of them are traversers. Like we see our main character here, the traverser self, Caramenta, went to her world and died, and she was able to take her identity. So becoming Caramenta in Earth 0, then I forgot what she said her name was. Caralex. So she was originally Caralex on Earth 22, and she took over being Caramenta in Earth 0. But we don't know if there are other traversers like they've been saying. We're not sure if they're just secretly going out and about, you know, to their worlds and kind of doing their thing, or if there's something else going on. But yeah, so those are the first 2 chapters. It's a little slow in the beginning, but I promise it speeds up a bit more as we kind of get through the background of this world. Yep. All right. So chapter 3, I will pick up next time. And so the reason that I don't have the title of the novel in the stream title is just because I don't want to attract attention to it. There's a little bit more to that than I want to say right now. I might bring it up later. Yeah, it is a slow start. It's a slow burn, but I promise it'll pick up. And let's see how many chapters we get. We get 21 chapters. There are 21 chapters in this baby. So it's going to take some time. So I definitely need to hop off at this point because I don't want to lose my voice. But thank you all for joining. This is one of my favorite books, honestly. Yeah, thanks for coming. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And I hope you all have a good Saturday, Sunday, wherever you are in the world. So, goodbye, y'all.